When you first look at the Škoda PA-II Zelva, it feels like you're looking at something that accidentally came from the future and got stuck in the 1920s. At a time when most armored cars were simple, boxy machines with flat armor plates, this thing shows up looking like a polished metal shell, almost aerodynamic, almost too smooth to be taken seriously. But that smoothness is exactly the point. This wasn't designed for beauty. This was design for physics. Engineers at Škoda were exploring the idea that shape could replace thickness, that instead of simply resisting bullets, you could redirect them, and in doing so, create protection without turning the vehicle into an overweight, slow-moving target. The armor itself was relatively thin by later standards, ranging from about 3 to 6 millimeters, but because of the rounded geometry, its effective protection was higher than those numbers suggest. When a projectile hits a curved surface, especially at an angle, it loses energy or deflects entirely, and that was the core principle behind the PA-II. But there's a trade-off here, and it's a big one: manufacturing. Those curved plates were extremely difficult and expensive to produce in the 1920s, which meant that even though the design was clever, it was never going to be cheap or easy to scale. Underneath that futuristic shell, the mechanical components were more traditional but still quite advanced for their time. The vehicle used a Škoda 4-cylinder gasoline engine with a displacement of about 9.7 liters, producing roughly 70 horsepower, which had to move a vehicle weighing around 7.3 to 7.5 tons. Power was delivered through a manual transmission to all 4 wheels, giving it a 4x4 drivetrain, which was not common at the time and provided decent off-road capability. On roads, the vehicle could reach a top speed of about 45 miles per hour, and interestingly, this speed was good enough that in 1933, when the political situation in Germany changed and tensions increased, 9 operational vehicles were quickly deployed to the border, demonstrating that despite its unusual design, it was not slow in practical conditions. However, once it left the road, things changed. The same mass and design that made it stable and protected also made it sluggish on rough terrain, where the weight became a disadvantage. So while it performed well on roads and in patrol roles, it wasn't particularly agile in difficult off-road conditions, which limited its effectiveness in certain military scenarios. Now, one of the most unique features of this vehicle is something you don't immediately see. It had 2 fully functional driving positions, one facing forward and one facing backward. This meant the vehicle could move in either direction at speed without turning around. In a combat situation, this is incredibly valuable. Instead of exposing yourself while turning, you simply reverse at full speed, maintaining armor orientation toward the threat. It's one of those rare features that feels both unusual and incredibly logical at the same time. As for armament, the PA-II took a different path compared to many armored vehicles of its era. It was equipped with 4 7.9 2mm machine guns, typically Schwarzlos types, mounted in different parts of the hull to provide near 360-degree coverage. Instead of relying on a turret, it used multiple firing points, allowing the crew to engage targets in various directions simultaneously. The ammunition load was around 3,000 to 4,000 rounds, which was sufficient for sustained defensive or suppression fire. There was no main cannon in the standard PA-II, which clearly defines its role. This was not a vehicle designed to fight heavy targets, but rather to support infantry, patrol, and maintain control over an area. Interestingly, there was an attempt to change that. In 1927, a modified version known as PA-II Zelva was developed, equipped with a 75mm gun, which required changes to the hull design. On paper, this sounds like a logical upgrade. More firepower, more versatility. But in reality, it turned out to be too expensive and not particularly effective, and the project was eventually abandoned, with the prototype being dismantled. It's a perfect example of how adding more power doesn't always make a vehicle better, especially if it compromises the original concept. Historically, the PA-II was officially adopted into service in December 1924, and about 12 units were built, with 2 specifically used for driver training, which already tells you that this was not just a combat vehicle, but also part of a broader effort to develop armored vehicle expertise. Export interest appeared early, between 1924 and 1925, but Czechoslovakia only agreed to sell them to Austria, where 3 vehicles entered service with the Vienna police. One of these was even modified with a small commander's cupola, showing that the design still had room for adaptation. These Austrian vehicles saw real action. In July 1934, during the Nazi coup attempt in Austria following the assassination of Chancellor Dollfuss, the PA-II armored cars were actively used to protect government buildings and secure key locations in Vienna. This is one of the few documented cases where these vehicles were used in a real internal conflict situation, not just training or patrol. After the Anschluss in 1938, when Austria was annexed by Germany, the vehicles remained in service, and by 1939, some PA-IIs in Czechoslovakia were taken over by German forces, where they were fitted with radio equipment, repurposing them more as communication or support vehicles rather than frontline combat machines. Back in Czechoslovakia, the PA-II didn't remain in frontline service for long. As newer and more advanced designs like the PA-III and PA-IV appeared, the older PA-II vehicles were gradually moved into reserve roles, which is a common fate for experimental but not fully optimized machines. They had done their job, not by dominating battlefields, but by proving concepts. And that's really the key to understanding the Škoda PA-II Zelva. It wasn't built to be the ultimate armored car. It was built to explore ideas: sloped and curved armor, all-wheel drive, multi-directional operation, distributed armament. Some of those ideas became standard in future vehicle design. Others remained too complex or expensive to adopt widely. But without machines like this, those ideas might never have been tested at all. In the end, the PA-II is one of those rare vehicles that looks strange at first, then interesting, and finally, once you understand it, surprisingly logical. It's not a mistake, it's not a curiosity, it's a deliberate attempt to rethink how protection, mobility, and combat capability can work together. And even though it never became widespread, it absolutely left its mark as one of the most unusual and engineering-bold armored cars of its time, proving that sometimes the most important machines are not the ones that win wars, but the ones that change how those wars are fought.